I, 28, F, stood in my wedding dress, a cloud of white tulle and dreams, and watched my new husband's world burn. The fire started with a single sentence, thrown like a match into a room full of gasoline. My brother-in-law, David, was holding a champagne flute, his face flushed with a mixture of alcohol and arrogance. He had just interrupted my father's toast, a clumsy, slurring intrusion that had silenced the entire reception hall. "Before we all get too sentimental," David announced, his voice booming unnaturally in the quiet room, "I think there's a little piece of business we need to clear up." My husband, Mark, stiffened beside me. I felt the warmth leave his hand as his grip tightened on mine. "David, not now," he hissed, his voice a low warning. But David was playing to the crowd. He smirked, a cruel twist of his lips that I had come to despise over the years. No, it's the perfect time. A time for family. A time for honesty." He pointed the stem of his glass at Mark. "He owes me the honeymoon funds." A collective gasp rippled through our guests. My mother's face went pale. My father, who had been mid-sentence, simply stood with his mouth agape. I felt a hot, prickling shame creep up my neck. This was it. The moment I had always dreaded, the public explosion of the rot that festered within Mark's family. For years, I had watched them enable David, the perpetual screw-up, the golden boy who could do no wrong even as he burned through every opportunity and every dollar he was ever given. Mark's parents, Helen and Robert, were already moving, their faces etched with a familiar blend of panic and practiced apology. They were the architects of this dynamic, the ones who always swept in to clean up David's messes, usually with Mark's money and emotional labor. "David, darling, you've had too much to drink," Helen said, her voice a strained whisper as she reached for his arm. He shrugged her off. "I'm perfectly sober, Mother. I just want what's mine. Mark promised me. He knows he did." All eyes were on us, on me, the bride, the woman who had just pledged her life to a man who is now being publicly accused of… what? Stealing from his own brother to pay for our honeymoon? The trip I had meticulously saved for, penny by penny, for over 2 years? The thought was so absurd, so insulting, that for a moment I couldn't even process the anger. All I felt was a deep, chilling mortification. Mark finally found his voice, a weak, pleading tone that made my stomach clench. "David, we can talk about this later. This is not the time or the place." "It's the only time and place," David shot back, "because you never answer my calls otherwise. You think you can just get married and forget your obligations?" The word obligations hung in the air, thick and ugly. I looked at Mark, really looked at him. His eyes were darting between David and his parents, a cornered animal seeking an escape route. He wouldn't look at me. He couldn't. And in that moment, a tiny, cold seed of doubt was planted in my heart. He wasn't just embarrassed. He was guilty. As the family drama began to swirl into a chaotic vortex, with Helen trying to drag David away and Robert attempting to laugh it off as a bad joke, I felt a gentle touch on my elbow. I turned to see one of the waiters, a young man with kind, dark eyes. He looked as uncomfortable as I felt. "Ma'am," he murmured, his voice barely audible over the rising din. He pressed a folded cocktail napkin into my hand, his fingers brushing against mine for a fleeting second. He gave me a look, a quick, meaningful glance that said this was important, before he melted back into the background, collecting empty glasses as if nothing had happened. My fingers closed around the small, square piece of paper. It felt heavy, impossibly heavy. I didn't want to open it. I wanted to throw it away, to pretend this whole nightmare wasn't happening. To go back to 5 minutes ago when my biggest worry was whether my shoes would start to pinch, but I couldn't. The waiter's look had been too urgent. I slipped my hand into the hidden pocket of my dress, the napkin a secret weight against my thigh. I watched Mark finally succeed in pulling David toward the exit, his parents fluttering around them like anxious birds. The band, after a painfully long pause, bravely started playing a soft jazz number, a pathetic attempt to fill the gaping wound in the atmosphere. Guests were whispering, their heads bent together. Some looked at me with pity, others with a morbid curiosity. I felt like an exhibit, the bride in the center of a disaster. My best friend Sarah rushed to my side. "Clara, are you okay? What was that?" she asked, her eyes wide with disbelief. "I don't know," I whispered, the lie feeling flimsy on my tongue, because I was starting to think I did know. I knew David was a leech. I knew his parents would do anything to protect his fragile ego. And I was starting to suspect that my new husband was not the man I thought he was. Later, after the scene had been contained and a fragile sense of normalcy had been restored, I excused myself to the restroom. My hands were shaking as I locked the door behind me. I leaned against the cool marble of the counter, my reflection a pale, startled stranger in the mirror. I took a deep breath and pulled the napkin from my pocket. My fingers fumbled as I unfolded it. The writing was neat, hurried script in blue ink. It wasn't a long message. It was just 2 short sentences. But they were enough to shatter everything. The note said, "He didn't just give him money. Check the business loan from last April. He's not who you think he is." I read the words again. And again. Business loan. Last April. The phrase echoed in my mind, unlocking a memory I had pushed aside. Last spring, Mark had been incredibly stressed. He had been short-tempered and distant. When I had asked him what was wrong, he had been vague. He told me it was a sudden, unexpected tax bill that had wiped out a chunk of his savings. He had been so convincing, so full of regret that we'd have to postpone our plans to increase our house down payment. I had comforted him, told him it was okay, that we were a team and we'd build it back together. A wave of nausea washed over me. It hadn't been a tax bill. It had been a loan. A loan to David. And if the waiter was right, it was connected to our honeymoon. The honeymoon I had paid for. The money I had earned through endless overtime shifts and freelance projects on weekends. The money I had proudly transferred into our joint account. The one we had set up for the wedding and the trip. I stared at myself in the mirror, at the woman in the ridiculously expensive white dress. The dress felt like a costume now. The whole day felt like a lie. The vows we had exchanged, the promises of trust and partnership, they all felt like ash in my mouth. The public humiliation was bad, but the private betrayal I was just beginning to uncover felt so much worse. This wasn't just about David's entitlement anymore. This was about Mark's deception. My husband, the man I had promised to love and trust just hours ago, had lied to me. He had taken our future and handed it over to his deadbeat brother, and he had let me believe we were building it together. I felt a strange calm settle over me, a cold, hard clarity that cut through the shock and the hurt. The party was still going on outside. The music was playing. People were drinking and laughing, oblivious to the fact that the marriage they were celebrating was already a sham. I folded the napkin carefully and tucked it into the bodice of my dress, right against my skin. It was a cold piece of evidence against my heart. I knew, with a certainty that terrified and empowered me, that I couldn't let this go. I had to get through the rest of this charade, this expensive party celebrating a lie. But the moment it was over, I was going to find out the truth. All of it. The wedding might be over, but my fight was just beginning. Getting through the rest of the night was the hardest performance of my life. I smiled for photos, my cheeks aching from the effort. I danced with my father, my feet feeling like lead. I listened to toasts from friends who spoke about Mark's integrity and our beautiful future. And with every word, the knot in my stomach tightened. Mark eventually returned to my side, his face a mask of forced cheerfulness. He smelled faintly of whiskey. "Sorry about that," he muttered, leaning in close. "You know how David gets. He's just jealous." I pulled back slightly. "Jealous of what, Mark? What exactly did he mean about the honeymoon funds?" I kept my voice low, even. He waved a dismissive hand. "It's nothing, honey. It's an old inside joke. a stupid argument we had years ago. He was drunk and decided to be an idiot. Don't let him ruin our night. He tried to kiss me, but I turned my head so his lips landed on my cheek. It felt like being kissed by a stranger. An inside joke. The lie was so blatant, so insulting to my intelligence. He thought I was that easy to fool. That feeling was worse than the public shame. It felt like he saw me as a simple problem to be managed, not as his partner. I spent the rest of the reception cataloging every lie I could remember from the past year. The car trouble that cost a fortune to fix. The investment opportunity that had supposedly fallen through. The constant vague complaints about work being tight. It was all starting to form a sickening pattern. Every excuse, every evasion was a brushstroke and a portrait of a man I didn't know at all. When it was finally time to leave, to walk through a shower of sparklers and get into the waiting car, I felt a profound sense of relief. The performance was over. We drove to the hotel in near silence. Mark seemed to take my quietness as exhaustion from the long day. He placed his hand on my thigh. I didn't flinch, but I didn't respond either. I just stared out the window at the city lights blurring past, my mind racing. The hotel suite was beautiful. Rose petals were scattered on the bed, and a bottle of champagne was chilling in an ice bucket. It was supposed to be the most romantic night of my life. Instead, it felt like a cage. Mark opened the champagne with a loud pop, the sound making me jump. "To us," he said, holding out a glass. "To a long and happy life. Sorry again about my brother. I'll deal with him tomorrow." I took the glass, my fingers cold against the crystal. "How are you going to deal with him, Mark?" I asked. He sighed, his shoulders slumping. "I'll talk to him. I'll make him apologize." He crossed a line. "What line, exactly?" I pressed. What was he talking about? "Clara, can we not do this tonight?" he pleaded. "It's our wedding night. Let's just be happy." I am not happy. The thought screamed in my head. I am standing on the precipice of a disaster. I took a small sip of the champagne. It tasted bitter. "Fine," I said. "Not tonight." I needed a plan. I needed to be smart about this. A direct confrontation now would only lead to more lies and denials. He was on his guard. I needed proof. The waiter's note was a starting point, a key. Now I just needed to find the lock. I pretended to be tired, yawning dramatically. I went through the motions of getting ready for bed, taking off the heavy dress and washing the makeup from my face. As I stood in front of the mirror in a simple slip, I saw the note tucked into my bra. I pulled it out and read it one more time. "Check the business loan from last April." I knew what I had to do. I had to wait. Mark fell asleep quickly, aided by alcohol and the emotional exhaustion of the day. I lay beside him in the dark, my eyes wide open, listening to the rhythm of his breathing. It was a sound that had always comforted me, the steady presence of the man I loved. Tonight, it sounded like the breathing of a stranger in my bed. I waited for an hour, then another, until I was certain he was in a deep sleep. Then, slowly, carefully, I slipped out of the bed. The floor was cold against my bare feet. I found his laptop on the desk in the corner of the suite. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure it would wake him up. I lifted the screen. The sudden glow of the login page felt like an accusation. I knew his password. We had shared everything. Or so I had thought. My fingers trembled as I typed it in. The desktop appeared, a photo of us from our engagement trip smiling back at me. A fresh wave of betrayal washed over me. I opened his internet browser. The history was mundane. Sports websites, news articles, a few searches for wedding suits. Then I opened his email. I searched for David's name. There were hundreds of emails stretching back years. I narrowed the search to the previous spring, focusing on March and April. And there it was. An email thread with the subject line, "Urgent Venture Capital." My breath hitched. I clicked on it. The first email was from David. It was frantic. full of grandiose promises and desperate pleas. He was talking about a new tech startup, a guaranteed success that just needed a little seed money to get off the ground. He claimed he had other investors lined up, but he needed one more to close the deal. The next email was from Mark. It was cautious. Dave, I don't know. We're saving for the wedding and the house. I can't just pull that kind of money out. Then came David's reply. It was a masterpiece of emotional manipulation. He brought up their childhood, how Mark had always been the responsible one, the lucky one. He talked about their father always favoring Mark. He painted himself as the underdog who just needed one break. This isn't just for me, it's for the family, he wrote. Imagine telling Dad I'm finally a success. You're the only one who can make that happen. The final email in the chain was from Mark. It was short. Okay, I'm in. But Clara can't know. Not yet. I'll tell her it was a tax issue. We can't worry her with this. My blood ran cold. He had actively conspired with his brother to deceive me. He had chosen to protect David's feelings and his parents' perception of David over our shared future. He had made a conscious decision to lie to my face. It wasn't enough. I needed to see the numbers. I logged into our joint bank account. I scrolled back through the transaction history, my heart hammering against my ribs. I went to April of last year. I scrolled past the usual entries, rent, groceries, my paycheck deposits, and then I saw it. A single massive withdrawal. $50,000. It was more than half of our entire savings. The savings I had worked so hard to build. The savings I thought were the foundation of our life together. The memo line contained just 3 words. Loan, D&M Ventures. D&M, David and Mark. I felt like I couldn't breathe. $50,000. He had given his brother $50,000 of our money. My money. The honeymoon David was demanding wasn't just the few thousand for the trip. He was talking about the whole damn loan. He wasn't demanding a gift. He was calling in a debt he believed Mark still owed him, likely because the first $50,000 had already been squandered. I closed the laptop, the soft click echoing in the silent room. I stood there in the dark, the city lights twinkling outside the window, and I felt nothing. The hurt, the anger, the shock, it had all burned away, leaving behind a cold, hard emptiness. The man sleeping in the bed was not my husband. He was a co-conspirator in a fraud committed against me. The wedding night was over. The marriage was over. I had been married for less than 12 hours, and I already knew it was the biggest mistake of my life. I crept back into bed, but I didn't sleep. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, and I began to make a new plan. This wasn't about saving a relationship anymore. This was about justice. It was about getting my money back, and my life back. And it was about making sure that Mark and David and their enabling parents understood exactly what they had done. The war had just begun. The next morning, I woke up before Mark. I showered and dressed, moving with a quiet purpose that felt alien to me. The bride from yesterday was gone. In her place was a woman with a mission. When Mark finally stirred, I was sitting in a chair by the window, fully dressed, sipping a cup of coffee I'd ordered from room service. He sat up, rubbing his eyes. "Morning, Mrs. Miller," he said with a groggy smile. The name felt like a costume I was desperate to shed. "We need to talk, Mark," I said, my voice flat. His smile faded. "Whoa, okay. What's wrong?" He saw my expression and his demeanor shifted instantly from relaxed husband to wary defendant. "Is this about David?" "I told you, I'm going to handle it." "I know you are," I said. "But first you're going to tell me about D&M Ventures." The color drained from his face. I watched him process my words, watched the flicker of panic in his eyes as he tried to figure out how much I knew. It was a dance I was all too familiar with. The quick calculation before the lie. "D&M Ventures?" he repeated, stalling. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't you?" I asked, taking a slow sip of my coffee. "Let me refresh your memory. It involves a $50,000 business loan that you made to your brother last April from our joint savings account. The money you told me went to pay a surprise tax bill. He stared at me, his mouth opening and closing silently, like a fish out of water. The denial was gone, replaced by pure, unadulterated panic. How did you find out? That's not the important question, I said, my voice dangerously calm. The important question is why you felt it was acceptable to steal our future and give it to him. Why you chose to lie to me for over a year. I didn't steal it, he insisted, his voice rising. It was a loan, a business investment. David had this great idea, and he just needed a little help to get it started. I was going to tell you, I swear. I was just waiting for the right time after the business took off. Took off? I laughed, a harsh, humorless sound. Mark, let me guess. The business is failing, isn't it? That's why David made that scene last night. He's not demanding the honeymoon money as a joke. He's demanding another payout because he's burned through the first $50,000. His silence was my answer. He collapsed back against the pillows, burying his face in his hands. I was just trying to help him. He mumbled into his palms. He's my brother. My parents. They always put so much pressure on me to look out for him. So you stole from your wife to please your parents and enable your brother, I summarized, my voice like ice. That's your defense. It's not like that, Clara. You're twisting it, he said, looking up at me, his eyes full of tears. It was a good performance. The desperate, misunderstood man who only wanted to do the right thing. I might have bought it yesterday, but not today. No, I'm not twisting it, I said, standing up. I'm seeing it clearly for the first time. You and your family have a system. David messes up, your parents panic, and you pay for it. The only new part of the equation is that now you're paying for it with my money. I was going to pay it back, he cried. Every penny, once the business was successful. There is no business, Mark, I snapped, my composure finally cracking. There's just David and his endless black hole of need, and you keep throwing everything we have into it. Our house fund, our trust, our marriage. I needed more than his confession. I needed to understand the whole picture before I made my next move. I thought about the waiter. He was the key. He knew something about David's past. He had seen this pattern before. I took a deep breath and pulled my phone out of my purse. I'm going out for a while, I said. I need some air. Clara, wait, Mark begged, scrambling out of bed. Don't go. We can fix this. Please. I looked at him, really looked at the man I had married. The desperation in his eyes wasn't for me. It was for himself. He wasn't afraid of losing me. He was afraid of the consequences. No, we can't, I said softly. You fixed it so it could never be broken in the first place. You just broke me instead. I walked out of the hotel room, leaving him standing there amidst the wreckage of our one-day marriage. My first call was to the wedding venue. I spoke to the manager, my voice steady and professional. I described the waiter, the young man with the kind, dark eyes. I told her he had found my lost earring, and I wanted to thank him personally and give him a tip. It was a thin lie, but it worked. She gave me his name, Leo, and after a little more gentle prodding, his phone number. My second call was to Leo. He answered on the third ring, his voice hesitant. Hello? Leo, my name is Clara Miller. You worked at my wedding last night. You gave me a note. There was a pause on the other end of the line. I shouldn't have done that, he said finally. I'm sorry if I caused you trouble. You didn't cause me trouble, I replied. You showed me the truth. I was wondering if I could talk to you. I'll buy you a coffee. I need to understand. He hesitated for a moment longer. Okay, he said. There's a cafe a few blocks from the venue. I can be there in 20 minutes. We met at a small, quiet coffee shop. Leo looked younger in the daylight, probably still in college. He looked nervous, wringing his hands as I sat down across from him. Thank you for meeting me, I said. He nodded, not meeting my eyes. When I saw David at the wedding, so smug, I got angry. I saw you and you looked so happy. And I knew what he was, what he does to people. I felt like I had to say something. What does he do? I asked gently. Leo finally looked at me and his eyes were full of a weary anger that seemed too old for his face. He's a con man, he said simply. A charming, manipulative con man who uses his family as a safety net. About 2 years ago, I was working at a restaurant to save up for school. David was a regular. He was always flashy, buying expensive bottles of wine, telling big stories. He found out I was saving up and had a small inheritance from my grandmother. He took a sip of his coffee, his hand shaking slightly. He told me about a business idea, a food delivery app. It sounded amazing. He had mock-ups, projections, a whole business plan. He was so convincing. He said he just needed a small final investment to get it over the line. $10,000. It was everything I had. My heart sank. It was the same story, the same pattern. I gave it to him. Leo continued, his voice bitter. And for a few months, everything seemed great. He'd send me updates, tell me about meetings with developers. Then the updates started to slow down. He stopped answering my calls. I went to the address he'd given me for their office. It was an empty room. There was no business. There never was. The whole thing was a lie. Did you go to the police? I asked. He laughed, a sad, broken sound. I tried, but he was smart. The contract I signed was for a high-risk seed investment. It was all perfectly legal. I had no recourse. I lost everything. And I know I'm not the only one. I heard he did the same thing to at least 2 other people. The pieces were clicking into place. David wasn't just a failure. He was a predator. And Mark wasn't just an enabler. He was the bank. Last night, Leo said, leaning forward, I overheard him talking on his phone in the hallway. He was laughing. He was telling someone, yeah, the wedding was a bust, but I put on a good show. Mark will cave. He always does. He'll get me the rest of the money by Monday. He said he was tired of living off the scraps from Clara's money and it was time for the main payout. Clara's money. The words were like a punch to the gut. They all knew. They knew it was my money and they didn't care. To them, I wasn't a person. I was a resource. A well that they could draw from whenever David got thirsty. He also mentioned something else. Leo added, his brow furrowed in thought. He was talking to his friend, bragging about how he had Mark completely under his thumb. He said he had proof of something Mark did a few years ago. Something about a college incident that Mark and his parents paid a lot of money to make disappear. He said that whenever Mark starts to get a backbone, he just has to remind him of that. And Mark folds. Blackmail. His own brother was blackmailing him. The rot was deeper and darker than I could have ever imagined. This wasn't just about financial desperation. It was about a lifetime of toxic control. Mark wasn't just weak. He was trapped. But that didn't excuse him. It didn't excuse him for pulling me into his trap with him. I sat there, the coffee growing cold in front of me, and I felt the last vestiges of love for my husband die. He hadn't just lied to me. He had used me. He had married me and merged our finances, knowing full well that he was bringing me into a den of wolves and that I would be the one to be devoured. Leo, I said, my voice shaking with a cold fury. You said he was bragging to a friend on the phone. Do you remember anything else? A name, maybe? Leo thought for a moment. Yeah, he said the guy's name. It was Jeremy. He said, "Don't worry, Jeremy, our payday is coming." Jeremy. I knew that name. Jeremy was David's best friend, his partner in crime since they were teenagers, and he was on my wedding guest list. Leo, you've done more for me than you can possibly imagine, I said, my mind racing, a new, audacious plan forming. Is there any chance you have any of the old documents? The fake business plan? The contract? He looked surprised. I think so. I kept everything in a box in my closet. I don't know why. I guess I always hoped I could do something with it. You can, I said, a grim smile touching my lips for the first time that day. You can help me make sure he never does this to anyone ever again. I left the coffee shop with a clear objective. I wasn't just going to get my money back. I was going to dismantle their entire corrupt system. I was going to expose David for the fraud he was, and Mark for the coward who funded him. And I was going to do it in a way they would never forget. Their world wasn't just going to burn. I was going to salt the earth so nothing could ever grow there again. My next step was to find Jeremy. I scrolled through my wedding photos on my phone, the happy images now looking like scenes from a horror movie. I found a picture of David at the reception, and there, right beside him, was Jeremy, laughing, a drink in his hand. I sent the photo to Sarah, my maid of honor, and the only person in the world I trusted right now. My text was simple. I need to find this man. His name is Jeremy. He's David's friend. It's an emergency. Sarah, being the incredible friend she was, didn't ask questions. She just replied, "On it." While I waited, I went to the bank. I walked into the branch where Mark and I had opened our joint accounts, the same place where we had excitedly discussed our financial future. I sat down with a personal banker, a kind-looking woman named Mrs. Davies. "Good morning," I said, my voice steady. "I'm Clara Miller. I have a joint savings account here with my husband, Mark Miller." "Of course, Mrs. Miller. Congratulations on your wedding yesterday," she said with a warm smile. The irony was not lost on me. "Thank you," I said. "I need to report suspicious activity on our account. A very large withdrawal was made last April without my consent or knowledge. I believe I am a victim of fraud." Her smile vanished. She immediately became professional and serious. "I see. Can you tell me the details?" I explained the situation calmly and rationally. I showed her the date and the amount of the transfer. I told her I believed my husband had made the transfer to his brother under duress and without my permission to fund a fraudulent business. I left out the part about him lying to me. For now, this was a banking issue, not a marital one. Because my name is on the account and I did not authorize this transfer, I would like to freeze all our joint accounts immediately, I stated. No more money can go in or out without my express in-person authorization. Mrs. Davies typed furiously into her computer. "I understand. Given the amount and the circumstances, we can certainly put a temporary freeze on the accounts pending an investigation. You will both need to come in to resolve this." "Thank you," I said. "That's all I need for now." I walked out of the bank feeling a small, crucial victory. I had cut off the money supply. Whatever David was demanding, whatever pressure he was putting on Mark no longer had the means to pay him off with my money. The first domino had fallen. Just as I stepped onto the sidewalk, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Sarah. It contained a screenshot of Jeremy's social media profile and his work address. He worked at a high-end car dealership downtown. "Got him." The message read, "What's going on, Clara? Are you okay?" I typed back, "I will be. I'll call you later and explain everything. Thank you. You're a lifesaver." My next destination was the car dealership. I walked in, the picture of a concerned new wife. I found Jeremy on the showroom floor, schmoozing a potential customer. I waited patiently until he was finished. When he saw me, his face registered a brief flash of recognition, followed by confusion. "Clara, Mark's wife? What are you doing here?" he asked. "Hello, Jeremy," I said, giving him a tight, polite smile. "I'm sorry to bother you at work, but it's an emergency. It's about David." I made sure to look distressed, my eyes wide with worry. His expression shifted to one of concern. "Is he okay? What happened?" "I'm not sure," I said, lowering my voice conspiratorially. "He's not answering his phone. Mark is worried sick." After that scene David made at the wedding, Mark is afraid he's going to do something stupid. He told me that David mentioned you, that you were supposed to get a payday. Mark is terrified David has gotten himself into some kind of trouble, maybe with loan sharks. He's afraid for your safety, too. I watched Jeremy's face. The fake concern melted away, replaced by a flicker of genuine fear. I had hit a nerve. Loan sharks. He hadn't considered that angle. He thought he was in on a simple family con, not something that could get him hurt. Loan sharks? He stammered. No, it's not like that. It's just a business deal. That's what Mark said. I lied smoothly. But David was so frantic last night, and he's been spending so much money lately. Mark is convinced he owes money to some very dangerous people, and that you might be in danger too. He sent me to find you, to warn you. Jeremy was pale now. I didn't know. He just told me it was a sure thing. An investment. Jeremy, I said, putting a hand on his arm, my voice full of false sympathy. Mark wants to help you. He wants to help both of you. But he needs to know everything. He needs to know who David owes money to. He needs to know the full truth so he can protect you. Can you tell me what the payday was for? Every detail you know could help us keep you safe. He was sweating. He looked around the showroom as if expecting to see a thug in a dark suit standing by a sports car. My bluff was working perfectly. I was offering him a way out, positioning Mark and myself as his saviors. Okay, he whispered, pulling me toward a small office. Okay, I'll tell you everything, but you have to promise Mark will handle it. David promised me a cut for helping him put the pressure on. That's all it was. I followed him into the office, my face a mask of concern. Inside, my heart was beating a triumphant rhythm. The second domino was about to fall. Jeremy was going to give me all the ammunition I needed to blow their world apart. Inside the sterile office, surrounded by posters of luxury cars, Jeremy fell apart. He told me everything, his words tumbling out in a rush of fear and self-preservation. He confirmed that D&M Ventures was a complete sham. It had never been a real company. The $50,000 had been spent within 6 months. David had bought a fancy car, leased, of course, a designer wardrobe, and had spent the rest on expensive dinners and parties to maintain the illusion of being a successful entrepreneur. Jeremy had been his wingman, enjoying the perks and helping to keep the story straight. He told me his brother was a soft touch, Jeremy confessed, wiping sweat from his brow. He said Mark felt guilty about being the successful son and would do anything to help David look good to their parents. And the scene at the wedding? I prompted gently. What was that about? The money ran out a few months ago, he explained. David has been trying to get more from Mark, but Mark was starting to push back, making excuses. David came up with the idea to confront him at the wedding. He said it was the perfect leverage. Public humiliation. He knew Mark's biggest fear was looking bad in front of everyone. Especially you and your family. He figured Mark would pay anything to make it go away. And what was your part in this? I asked, my voice still soft, sympathetic. I was supposed to back him up, Jeremy admitted, shamefaced. If Mark tried to deny it, I was supposed to act concerned and tell people that David had been telling me for weeks how Mark owed him money. It was all a performance. The payday he promised me was supposed to be 10% of whatever he managed to squeeze out of Mark. So, it was premeditated. A coordinated attack at my wedding. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. They had planned to ruin the happiest day of my life, simply as a business tactic. Jeremy, I said, my voice hardening slightly. You said you were supposed to back him up. I need you to do that. But you're going to back me up instead. He looked at me, confused. What do you mean? Mark's parents are hosting a brunch for the family tomorrow, I said, to smooth things over, to pretend that what David did was just a drunken mistake. I'm going to be there, and I'm going to confront them. All of them, and you're going to be there with me. Me? Why? He asked, his eyes wide with panic. I can't. David would kill me. David is the least of your worries right now, I said, my voice turning to steel. I dropped the concerned wife act completely. You just admitted to conspiring to commit fraud and extortion. That's a crime, Jeremy. A serious one. And I have you on tape admitting to it. I tapped my phone, which had been recording our entire conversation, in my pocket. His face went white. You recorded me? I did, I said. So you have two choices. You can come to that brunch with me tomorrow and tell everyone exactly what you just told me. You will tell them how David planned the whole thing, how the business was a sham from the start, and how you were his accomplice. If you do that, I will consider the matter between us closed. I will delete this recording and you can walk away from this mess. Or you can refuse. And I will walk out of this office and go directly to the police, and I will give them this recording. And then I will go to your boss and play it for him. How do you think he'll feel about having a con artist selling his luxury cars? He stared at me, trapped. He had thought he was dealing with a naive, heartbroken bride. He was realizing, far too late, that he was dealing with someone who had nothing left to lose. You do that? He whispered. Try me, I said. He slumped in his chair, defeated. Okay, he said, his voice barely a whisper. Okay, I'll do it. I'll be there. Good, I said, standing up. I'll text you the time and place. Don't be late. I walked out of the car dealership and into the bright sunlight, feeling a grim sense of satisfaction. I had the confession. I had the inside man. And I had a stage for the final act. My final stop of the day was to meet Leo. He had a manila envelope for me. Inside were the documents from his own ordeal with David. The slick, fraudulent business plan for the food delivery app, the predatory investment contract, and a string of printed-out emails full of the same empty promises David had made to Mark. The pattern was undeniable. He was a serial fraudster. Thank you, Leo, I said, my voice thick with gratitude. This is more helpful than you know. Just promise me you'll stop him, he said, his eyes pleading. So he can't do this to anyone else. I promise, I said, and I meant it. That evening, I returned to the hotel suite. Mark was sitting on the edge of the bed, his head in his hands. He looked up when I entered, his eyes red-rimmed and desperate. Clara, thank God you're back, he said, rushing toward me. I've been going out of my mind. Where were you? We need to talk. We need to fix this. There's nothing to fix, Mark, I said, my voice devoid of emotion. I placed my purse on the table. But we do need to talk. I know I messed up, he said, reaching for my hands. I pulled them away. I was wrong. I was so wrong. I was scared and stupid. I should have told you everything from the beginning, but I can make it right. I'll get the money back from David. I'll do whatever it takes. It's a little late for that, I said. I went to the bank today. I froze our accounts. The desperation in his eyes curdled into anger. You did what? Why would you do that? You had no right. I had every right, I shot back. It was my money you gave away, Mark. My $50,000. Or have you forgotten that? It was our money, he yelled. We were married. For less than a day, I screamed back, the fury I had been suppressing all day finally breaking free. A marriage that you entered under false pretenses, a partnership you betrayed before it even began. You don't get to talk to me about our money. He recoiled as if I had struck him. Clara, please, he whispered, his anger deflating back into that pathetic, pleading tone. I love you. We can get through this. My parents are having a brunch tomorrow. We can go, present a united front. We'll tell everyone David was just being an idiot. It will all blow over. A cold, mirthless smile spread across my face. Oh, we're going to the brunch, Mark, I said. We are definitely going to the brunch. And we are going to present a front, but it's not going to be the one you're expecting. He looked at me, a flicker of fear in his eyes. He didn't understand. He still thought this was a problem he could manage, a fire he could put out. He had no idea I was about to pour gasoline on it and hand him the match. "Get some sleep." "Mark," I said, my voice turning soft again, a chilling imitation of a loving wife. "It's going to be a very big day tomorrow." He watched me, confused and wary, as I went into the bathroom and closed the door. I leaned against it, my heart pounding with a mixture of terror and exhilarating resolve. The plan was in place. All the pieces were on the board. All I had to do now was knock them all down. The drive to his parents' house was thick with a tense, suffocating silence. Mark kept glancing at me, trying to gauge my mood. He was wearing his best sorry husband face, a pathetic mix of remorse and hope. He clearly thought that my agreeing to come to the brunch meant I was willing to play along, to sweep everything under the rug for the sake of appearances. He had no idea he was driving his own executioner to the gallows. Helen and Robert's home was a monument to their denial. A large, impeccably clean house where every surface gleamed and nothing was ever out of place. It was the perfect setting for a family that prioritized image over reality. They greeted us at the door with bright, brittle smiles. "Clara, darling, we're so glad you came," Helen chirped, pulling me into a hug that felt like being embraced by a mannequin. "We were so worried. Yesterday was just, well, you know David. He gets these silly ideas in his head." "It was more than a silly idea, Helen," I said, pulling away from her. My voice was calm, but it cut through her forced cheerfulness like a knife. Her smile faltered for a second. Robert stepped in, clapping Mark on the shoulder. "It's all sorted now. I had a strong word with David. He feels terrible about it. He's going to apologize to you both." Right on cue, David appeared from the living room. He had the decency to look slightly ashamed, but I could see the familiar glint of arrogance in his eyes. He thought he had won. He thought his little stunt had worked, and Mark was about to deliver another pile of cash. "Clara, Mark," he said, his voice a low murmur. "I am so sorry about yesterday. I was out of line. I drank way too much. I hope you can forgive me." It was a well-rehearsed speech. Pathetic. Mark looked at me expectantly, waiting for me to accept the apology and complete the charade. I just stared at David. "Is that all you have to say?" He looked taken aback. Yeah, I'm really sorry." "You're not sorry you did it," I said, my voice ringing out in the quiet foyer. "You're just sorry it might not have worked." The smiles on Helen and Robert's faces froze. Mark looked horrified. "Clara, what are you doing?" he hissed. "I'm ending this," I said, turning to face all of them. "All of it, right now." A few other family members were starting to drift into the hallway, drawn by the drama. Mark's cousin, Emily, a woman I'd always found to be sensible and kind, looked on with a worried expression. Perfect. The audience was gathering. "I think we should all go into the living room," I announced. "We have a lot to discuss. It's a matter of family business, after all." We all filed into the pristine living room. I remained standing while the rest of them sat down, a silent power move that put them all on edge. "Helen, Robert," I began, my gaze sweeping over them. "For years, you have enabled your son's destructive behavior. You've taught him that there are no consequences for his actions because his brother will always be there to bail him out." "Now, that's not fair," Robert blustered. "Isn't it?" I countered. "Let's talk about the $50,000 Mark gave David last April. Money taken from our joint savings account, money I earned that was supposed to be for our down payment on a house." Helen gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. She looked at Mark, her eyes wide. "Mark, is this true?" Mark couldn't speak. He just stared at the floor, the picture of guilt. "He told me it was for a tax bill," I continued. "But it wasn't, was it, Mark? It was for a company called D&M Ventures, a company you went into business with your brother on. Behind my back. It was an investment." David finally piped up, finding his voice. "A legitimate business." "Really?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. Is that what you told Leo when you took his life savings for your fake food delivery app 2 years ago? David's face went slack with shock. He had no idea how I knew that name. I I don't know who you're talking about. Oh, I think you do, I said. I pulled the manila envelope from my purse and tossed it onto the coffee table. Here's the business plan you showed him. It looks remarkably similar to the one you showed Mark. It seems you're very good at creating fiction. Just then, the doorbell rang. Everyone looked confused. Helen started to get up. Don't worry, I'll get it, I said. I'm expecting someone. I walked to the door and opened it. Jeremy was standing on the porch, looking pale and terrified. Come on in, Jeremy, I said brightly. We're just getting to the good part. I led him into the living room. David looked like he had seen a ghost. Jeremy, what the hell are you doing here? He snarled. He's here to tell the truth, I said, turning to Jeremy. Go on, tell them everything you told me yesterday. With a shaky voice, Jeremy recounted the entire sordid plan. He told them how the business was a lie, how David had spent all the money, and how the scene at the wedding was a premeditated act of extortion designed to force Mark's hand. With every word, the atmosphere in the room grew colder. Helen was openly weeping. Robert looked like he was about to have a stroke. And Mark just looked broken. But that's not even the whole story. Is it? I said, turning my attention back to the brothers. Because this isn't just about Mark being weak, is it, David? It's about you having something on him. Something from college. Something you use to blackmail him whenever he tries to say no. This was the final blow. David lunged to his feet. You shut your mouth, he screamed. Mark finally looked up, his eyes pleading with me. Clara, don't. Don't what, Mark? I asked, my voice laced with venom. Don't expose the whole rotten truth? Don't tell everyone that the only reason you've been funding your brother's parasitic lifestyle is because you're terrified he'll expose some secret you paid to bury years ago? I'm done keeping your secrets. I'm done paying for them. The room was silent, save for Helen's quiet sobs. I had laid it all bare. The lies, the fraud, the blackmail. The perfect family image was shattered, and the ugly reality was exposed for everyone to see. So here's what's going to happen, I said, my voice clear and steady, the voice of a general giving orders. The marriage is over. I've already spoken to a lawyer. I will be filing for an annulment on the grounds of fraud. Mark, you and David will pay me back my $50,000, plus interest, plus the money I spent on this sham of a wedding. I have Leo's testimony, and I have Jeremy's recorded confession. If I don't see that money in my account within 30 days, I will go to the police and I will press charges against both of you for fraud and conspiracy. I looked at Helen and Robert. And you two? You can keep your golden boy. You can spend the rest of your lives cleaning up his messes, but you will never, ever speak to me again. I turned to leave. Mark grabbed my arm, his face a mess of tears and desperation. Clara, please, I love you. We can fix this. I'll cut him off, I swear. I'll do anything. I looked down at his hand on my arm, then back up at his face. I felt nothing. No love, no pity, not even anger anymore. Just a vast empty space where my heart used to be. You're right about one thing, Mark, I said, my voice soft. You do owe me. You don't just owe me the money. You owe me the life you promised me and then stole. You owe me the trust I gave you that you shattered into a million pieces. And that is a debt you can never repay. I pulled my arm from his grasp. I walked out of the living room, past the stunned faces of their family, and out the front door into the clean, fresh air. I didn't look back. The house of lies could burn to the ground behind me. I was already free. The days that followed were a blur of lawyers, paperwork, and difficult phone calls. The first call I made was to my parents, telling them the marriage was over. They were shocked and heartbroken, but when I explained the full extent of Mark and David's deception, their sadness turned to a quiet, protective fury. They supported my decision completely, offering me a place to stay and a shoulder to cry on. My conversation with Mark was the hardest. He called me dozens of times, leaving long, rambling voicemails full of apologies, excuses, and desperate pleas. I finally answered, knowing I needed to have one last, definitive conversation to make the ending clean. "Clara, thank you for picking up," he said, his voice hoarse. I just, I need you to know how sorry I am. I was a coward. I let David and my parents control me. I should have protected you. I should have chosen you. "You did make a choice, Mark," I replied, my voice calm and detached. I was sitting in my childhood bedroom, surrounded by the ghosts of a younger, more naive version of myself. "You made a choice every day for over a year to lie to me. You chose to sacrifice our future for his. That wasn't one mistake. It was 1,000 of them." "But I can change," he insisted. "I'll go to therapy. I'll cut David out of my life completely. We can start over. Please, Clara, don't throw away everything we had." "What did we have, Mark?" I asked, and the question was genuine. "We had a relationship built on a foundation of lies. You weren't my partner. You were managing me. You were hiding a whole part of your life from me. The person I thought I was marrying doesn't exist. There's nothing to throw away because it was never real." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I could hear him breathing, the sound ragged. "So that's it?" he whispered. "It's just over?" "It was over the moment you decided your brother's failed business was more important than our life together," I said. "The money will be transferred to my account by the end of the month, as we discussed. If it's not, my lawyer has instructions to proceed. Goodbye, Mark." I hung up before he could reply. There was nothing left to say. True to their word, or more likely, terrified of the legal consequences, the money appeared in my account 3 weeks later, $50,000, plus an additional sum to cover the wedding costs. It wasn't a victory. It just felt like a refund for a defective product. A few days after that, I got a call from an unexpected number. It was Emily, Mark's cousin. "Clara, it's Emily. I hope it's okay that I'm calling," she said, her voice hesitant. "It's fine, Emily," I said. I had always liked her. She seemed to exist outside the toxic bubble of her aunt and uncle's family. "I just wanted to say, I am so sorry for what they put you through," she said, her voice full of genuine remorse. "No one deserves that. What you did at the brunch, it was incredible. You were so brave." "I wasn't brave," I replied. "I was just done." "Well, I wanted you to know that it had an impact," she continued. "The family is a mess. My aunt and uncle are trying to blame you, of course, saying you were cruel and unstable. But no one is buying it. Not after what Jeremy said. The story is out. Everyone knows what David did and that Mark and his parents enabled it. They've been completely ostracized." "And Mark and David?" I asked, a flicker of curiosity getting the better of me. "They're not speaking," Emily said. "Apparently they had a huge physical fight after you left. Mark finally blew up at David for ruining his life, and David threw that college incident back in his face. My uncle had to pull them apart. David has moved out. I heard he's staying on Jeremy's couch. Mark is still at the house with his parents, and from what I hear, he's a wreck. He lost his wife and his brother in the same day." I felt a pang of something, but it wasn't pity. It was just a distant sadness for the man I thought Mark could have been. "Thank you for telling me, Emily," I said. "I appreciate it." "Take care of yourself, Clara," she said before hanging up. The annulment was finalized quickly and quietly. Legally, it was as if the marriage had never happened. I moved into a new apartment, started to rebuild my savings, and spent a lot of time with Sarah and my family, the people who had proven their loyalty. One afternoon, a few months later, I was cleaning out a box of wedding-related items. Gifts to return, decorations, paperwork. At the bottom of the box, I found the plane tickets for the honeymoon. 2 non-refundable first-class tickets to Italy. For a moment, I just stared at them, a painful reminder of the future that had been stolen. Then an idea sparked. I picked up my phone and called Sarah. Hey, I said, do you have a valid passport and an empty suitcase? A week later, Sarah and I were sitting on a balcony overlooking the Amalfi Coast, glasses of wine in our hands. The sun was warm on my skin, and the sea was a brilliant, impossible blue. It was beautiful. It was perfect. To new beginnings, Sarah said, clinking her glass against mine. To new beginnings, I repeated, a real, genuine smile spreading across my face. I thought about Mark and his family, trapped in their cold, pristine house, suffocating in the mess they had made. I thought about the life I had almost had, a life of secrets and lies, of constantly propping up a broken system. And I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. The wedding had been a disaster. The public humiliation had been excruciating. But it had also been a gift. It had been the catalyst that had forced the truth into the light and set me free. I took a sip of wine and looked out at the endless expanse of the sea. Mark hadn't just owed David the honeymoon funds. He had owed me honesty. He had owed me loyalty. He had owed me a partnership. In the end, he owed me my entire future. And sitting there in the Italian sunshine with my best friend by my side, I realized I had finally collected. I was whole again, not because I got the money back, but because I got myself back. And that was a debt no one could ever take from me again.